I'm assuming this is not going to be included in the show.
Righto, well, let's start the show.
Yes.
And we are guestless tonight.
Guestless,
way. We had 2 shows back to back with guests, which we've never done before.
Whoa.
Totally threw me off last show. But we will be back with a very cool guest in the next episode. I'm really excited about that one.
Are you going to drop a teaser to who it is? I mean, we know who it is. I will,
actually.
Yeah.
He's been on the show before. It doesn't really narrow it down, but he's one of them. Yeah. And he's doing really amazing things at the moment, and he's doing really well. So we are going to have him back on the show and have a follow-up chat.
Yes, that'd be cool.
Yeah, very excited.
Cool.
So what's going on in the shop? Brian, why don't we start with you for a change?
Busy.
Good.
All workbenches and floor surfaces are full. It's still just me in the shop, and I'm just about on top of things. Yeah, the shelves are all fully assembled and waiting to be installed and just being held up by brass hardware in the United States Postal Service, which I think is nearly here, maybe. But yeah, like that tricky thing we always say, like if it's an external thing that hasn't been caused by the client, then what the hell do you do when you've got a large piece taking up all your workspace? You just got to sort of deal with it, take it on the chin. Yeah. So yeah, I've got a reasonable amount.
You're getting the hinges in from. You're getting the hinges in from the US.
Nah, they're not hinges. They're like little. So the shelves are mainly for books, but in the center there's a record player and an amp. And we wanted to find a way of. There's these 45-degree brass connectors that sort of. It kind of looks like, you know, the olden days when somebody would go around selling popcorn in a movie theater, and the straps. So these kind of brass straps, and we were trying to find a way to connect the straps to the timber, and whether we're going to use demon bolts or just a little nice brass fixing. And we came up with the idea of using kind of knurled brass knobs to sort of reference the amp.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Unfortunately, the only place that stocks them is in America, which makes them imperial, which means all your threaded inserts have to be imperial, which means you've got to get those from America as well. So yeah, it's been fun.
Do you think it's worth going down that road versus having someone turn them up? I mean, how many do you need? Just as a curiosity.
I was after 8.
Right. So you could probably get it turned up, but you're going to be paying a minimum of an hour for an engineer on a lathe.
Yeah, I think it was touch and go. But yeah, the only reason I ordered it from the States was the last time I got something from America, it arrived in like 3 days.
Yeah.
Whereas this has been a month.
That's pretty normal these days, I think.
Yeah. But that's okay. Lots of other things to work on. Doing some more stuff for John Mortal Architects for their Sydney office, and potentially going up to Sydney for an awards show. May have picked up a sneaky award to Sydney for an awards.
Oh, that's for that table?
Maybe. Can't really discuss it.
Okay.
Maybe.
Oh, right.
There may be an award that may be linked to some kind of award show. So yeah, we'll see.
Fun times.
So that'd be nice.
Cool.
And so you said you're flat out busy. Are you looking at getting an intern back involved, or is it just not on the cards?
Potentially. Like, this kind of feeds back into what I was thinking. Like, we don't plan topics on the show really when we have these chats, but I was thinking tonight might be a good one to talk about. Like managing anxiety and impostor syndrome and all those kind of things that goes with being a small business owner. So yeah, like everything's under control in terms of the workshop, and it's allowing me to actually make a proper living, which is great. But the second that I take somebody else on, I'm then responsible for supporting them. So it's kind of that balance. And then with a baby coming, another baby coming, it's like, how do I balance these hours? So I'm literally getting home from work, bath time, story time with my son, hanging out with Lanny for an hour, and then I'm going back to work till midnight, like just on the computer doing quoting and designing, and then back up in the morning and do it all again. And that's
crazy.
Sort of what it's been like for about 2 weeks now.
That's pretty brutal.
Maybe longer, actually, maybe 3 weeks. So yeah, like I'm on top of things, but yeah, I just thought it would be a good thing to discuss.
Yeah.
Just how you have seen like weaknesses in your business, how you've dealt with them, like this from the process of starting your business. Like, where did you draw the line at faking it till you make it, and then when you've made it in inverted commas, how has that changed?
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I just want to touch on something that we've talked about a bit in the show before, just a smaller topic, and then we'll get into it, Bryan. But Joey, you've talked about how you're not going for constant growth.
Yeah.
Is this not potentially one of those forks now, Bryan, where you're saying, I'm going to stop taking work because of family life balance?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of that. Just like life balance.
Yeah. And you don't have to necessarily stop taking the work. It's just when you start straight off the bat, you start saying, well, I do now. It's like, when do you want this thing? Like, I'll stop a client mid-sentence. They'll be like, oh, I just saw you make beds. Can you make me a bed? I'll just say, when do you want it? If you want it in the next 2 weeks, it's not happening. If you want it in the next 3 months, we can talk about it. And it's kind of a 50-50 split of people just hanging up, and then some people continue the conversation. So, and that's what you want to weed out straight away. So,
there's no point in dragging that out to 2 or 3 emails and then a phone call. It's like I'm exactly the same, Joey. I'm like, this is the current lead time. That's if you place the order this week. If you get back to me next week, it might have gone out by another 2 weeks.
That is the trickiest thing. And it's kind of a bit of a side topic on itself, but it's very difficult to explain, I feel like, when you say to a client, if they say, okay, I can make your table in 3 weeks, but like you say, based on the work coming in today, I could start it in 3 weeks. Now, they wait a week and get some other quotes in or something, and then they come back to you and say, right, we're still locked in for that 3 week date. And like, actually, no, I just got 2 kitchen jobs come in. You're now going to wait an extra 8 weeks. And then that throws them for a loop. And it's really difficult to explain that, how we're not massive businesses,
I've sort of found it from a client's perspective that it's probably changed a little bit through COVID and waiting for everything to arrive by mail. They're sort of getting used to the idea of waiting, but I've found it a struggle for me to say to somebody, like, I've always tried to say 8 to 12 weeks. I like, no matter what the pace was, and I'll just grind myself to the ground to get it done in that 8 to 12 weeks. I don't think I've ever delivered a piece late that's been like caused by me not finishing it. But now I'm having to tell people, like, it's 6 months out. And for me, that's unusual because I don't have generally a huge volume of work. I'm working on 3 or 4 pieces. But yeah, just managing just planning things that far in advance for me is quite unusual. When, you have all these extra things on top of you, like what's going to happen in my workshop, what's going to happen in family life, all those kind of things. So it's causing me I'm writing a lot more lists and doing sort of daily checklists and trying to break things down into small chunks. Somebody actually asked me about the shelves that I was doing. They're like, Jesus, that was a big thing to, like, how did you cope with that? And it was literally like breaking things down into tiny elements. I'll deal with, this part of the shelves today. I'll deal with the miter cuts. I'll deal with the glue ups. And it was in such small chunks that I wasn't even aware of it coming together until the first day of doing the big dry fit. And then you're like, oh shit, it's actually massive.
That's how I pretty much take on all jobs now, and I'm not really that focused on how big the job is. Yep. The only part of the job that tells me it's big is that the dollar value of the job kind of gives you an indication of how many weeks you might be working on it. But for me, everything is broken down to today we're just cutting this shape out, and by the end of the day I'd like to be here, which might only be a 16th of the way through the whole job, but I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah.
It just gets a little tricky sometimes when you have to get to a certain point so you can order like a piece of glass or something. And then you're like, well, I know it's going to take it 2 weeks to get the piece of glass, so I need to get to here first. And then it starts screwing with your brain about how much work you should be getting done to meet some deadline, which probably doesn't actually exist.
Yep.
Well, talking about faking it till you make it, that's something that's, because obviously I'm not as far down this road as you guys are. But when people have asked me to quote them on work, or when I've said I'll give you an indication of time, I've always had to sound like I know this is what the project's going to be, and this is how long it's going to take, and these are the steps. And I think similar to what you're saying, Brian, then I just pull a figure, and then it is what it is. And then you've got to stick with it, because otherwise you look like you don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, never change your quote unless the client changes something. But that's when everyone changes. As soon as a client makes a change, just about any business will just suddenly find, oh shit, yeah, now it's going to cost this much more because I actually undercharged for all this other stuff. So that one change is going to make your job cost this much more.
Yeah.
That happens all the time, I think.
But it's a tricky thing. Like in our kind of Antipodean sort of culture, like it is that European thing. I think we spoke about it with Damien Wright once, where we put expectations on ourselves to let your work speak for your business. Like, whereas the kind of American model of screaming, this is the best, buy it. I mean, that's a mass generalization, but they're much better at self promotion.
Yeah.
Whereas we kind of like to quietly self promote. And I think it's probably, in the long term, it's probably the best way to get work, because you end up getting word of mouth and you build really tight relationships with clients that you've done good work for in the past. But it means that the process of building your business is so much slower. Yeah,
and it's an odd kind of juxtaposition, because when you're starting out, you want work in and you feel like you should be maybe screaming from the rooftops about how good you are. But you're personally pretty conflicted because you don't know if you're good yet.
Because you're not good.
Yeah, and you're not good. And so you might have, and I was always freaked out about this, having someone come to me and ask me to make something, which I have no clue how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm calling myself a furniture maker. So what am I going to do?
Until you're making something for the second time or the third time.
Yeah.
That's probably where you can start saying, I'm no longer faking it, because you've got it down. But particularly, Joey, for yourself, you said when you started you wanted to do all the new things. That'd be pretty daunting, because you constantly feel like you're behind the eight ball the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I've said a bunch of times, I think, on this podcast, when I first started, I went out of my way to practice these techniques which no one really ever asked for. But sometimes I did, but like crazy things, curved things, rocking chairs and cabriolet legs and things that I thought was the classic furniture, which no one actually wants anymore. But I kind of taught myself how to make those things, and it did make me feel a bit more confident, but probably a waste of time. But
it's a bit of a sadistic thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I think so many makers and designers suffer from.
Mm.
It's like we've got to put ourselves through that to then feel as though we've got the badge.
Yeah, it's not until you see your work next to someone else who's a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And just today I was doing that. I was looking at this guy's kitchen, someone else and a job I was on, and compared it to my work, and they were pretty similar, very close. And I thought, well, actually that's pretty cool, that you could probably stand back and somebody would probably think the same person did both of these jobs. They're close enough in style and fit and finish that it's pretty much the same thing. So when you get to see that, and it takes a while to get yourself in a position where you might even be like that, but when you get to kind of compare, and then I find myself talking to those tradies a lot more now. I used to kind of be scared, like, don't look at my work, I'm just over here doing what I'm doing, don't come and look at it. But now I'll actually go over to them and say, hey, look, that looks awesome. I see, usually find something to compliment them on. It's a good way to start a conversation. But a genuine compliment of like, well, you did that detail really nicely. I can see what you're about to do. Good on you. Looks awesome. And as soon as you say that to any tradesman, that's when it's genuine, you actually will probably make a good friend out of it too.
It's a really like, you see, my advice to, in fact, reflecting on the things that I did to manage those kind of imposter syndromes, similar to what you were saying about like just, you know, learning every new technique and trying not to do repeat pieces over and over again, trying to do different things, design them, make them different ways. The biggest advice I could give anybody is, you know, put their work out there in exhibitions. And now that we're finally out of the COVID age where exhibitions weren't really possible, like putting your work alongside people of, you know, the same level as you and judging your work against them, so entry level, and then comparing that to the people that have been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And it'll become pretty obvious to see what the steps are that you need to take to improve your work, either the design of it, the build quality of it, the finishing. But yeah, that's, in hindsight, that's probably the best thing that I've done. And maybe it's just the fact that I haven't done it in a few years. I'm like, geez, I just want to get my work out in public again.
Yeah, are you entering something in the wood?
You are.
Sorry, Robin.
You go.
You go, Joe. I was just going to say, are you entering a piece, Bryan, in the Wood Review this year?
Yeah, I've entered a couple of pieces in it.
Yeah, awesome.
I've entered a fair few competitions, but they're all just online ones now.
Right.
Like there's very few that are sort of done in person.
Yeah, they keep emailing me to ask me to
hurry up, Joey.
Put something in, and I've got nothing that I can that fits any of the categories at the moment. So I'm just. They do have a bookshelf category, but I'm not sure if built-in bookshelves count. So.
Should we go vote for him, or is that a bit of conflict of interest?
Should we get the whole? I don't think there's a public
all the podcast
vote,
viewers too.
No, I don't. I mean, it's a people's choice, maybe. Did they have a people's choice?
Actually, sure. Yeah, you're right. I can't remember if it was voted on.
Not sure.
Yeah, no, you're right. No. But going back to what we were saying, I think you've also got to, from an imposter syndrome perspective, you've also got to consider who are you comparing to? Because in your example there, Joe, you talked about comparing it to someone else's work. The average person who's buying your furniture, it's a very different level. I remember my old place, my neighbor, who was not a woodworker by any stretch of the imagination, was making coffee tables out of decking and, you know, sort of recycled timber. They were the most rudimentary things, which is a really nice way of saying what I want to say. But he was making more profit on his sales than I was, because that's what people wanted. So, you know, always keep that in mind.
Yeah, there's a bit of that kind of furniture, I think, just plays to a certain budget, you know, and the work that we all strive to do is not necessarily budget focused, but at least let us put the time into a piece to make ourselves happy with it. And often that just takes more time, and we know time is money, and so pieces become more expensive. And so straight away you're lumped into this kind of luxury goods business, essentially, even though that's not really how we see ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. They're not the people that we associate with, but you have to engage with them to run the business that you want to run.
Yeah, and it becomes that old trope of, can you afford your own work? Yeah, probably not. No, of course not.
That's a very good one. I've never heard that before. That's really good.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, if you had to hire yourself to build a dining table, would you be able to afford it from yourself? And it's like, yeah, probably not.
Wouldn't waste my money.
Yeah. So, Bryan, you mentioned before about anxiety about running a small business. And about having a long lead time. Let's say you've got 3, 4, 5 months of time before you think you might get to a job. And what I've been doing, which really has helped, I keep surprising myself because I forget I do these things, was I make all these notes. Like, I've said this before, but each job I have a file and a spreadsheet and all sorts of drawings and stuff, so I can just search on my computer for the person's name, and then all this stuff pops up. And I'll make all these notes on the spreadsheets. I'll make all these notes on my costings, just about all those little things in the job where if it was only a week away, you probably wouldn't bother writing it down. Just little, like maybe you had to find a special piece of hardware and you found this one supplier and you remember where it was. You don't have to. But then 6 months down the track, you're like, shit, how is I going to do that thing? I need a special bit of hardware. What is it? But if you've already got a link saved somewhere, and so these days I'll look at my calendar, okay, I've got this job to do, and I'll just open the file and all these questions come up, and then I'm like, oh yep, there's a link, there's a note about how I'm going to make that, a little sketch, and I've gone through all the problem solving already, so I can pretty much just get straight on to cutting timber, because I've already just take me 10 minutes to kind of overview the job again, work through all the details. I've done all the hard work, which takes more time at the first kind of client meetings and stuff. But I think I find if you don't make all these notes, your job ends up not how you wanted it to. Like you make mistakes in the build.
It's just things that are in your head, and if you're working on across multiple 4 or 5 jobs. Yeah,
and it's so easy to either have the jobs kind of mixed together in your head, or just one just overlaps the last one and you've completely forgot. Like if you've ever tried to price up more than one job in a day,
it kills me.
And you're like, shit, what have I even, how am I going to make this? And you go back to, like, I'm halfway through it and I'm thinking about the other job still. Like I'm like, what am I? You're completely backwards. So the more I can make notes about what I'm doing really helps with the anxiety of what's next week's job. Shit, what have I forgotten? It's all there still.
I like that.
So are you talking about making notes for that particular job so that when you are 6 weeks into that job, you've got those notes? Okay.
It's nearly like a digital clipboard or something, yeah?
Yeah, or just even notes on my drawings, on my SketchUp. I'll write myself little notes, like and even draw myself little detailed drawings about how I'm going to do part A and part B is going to meet together. Just things that, all the problems that would arise, I try and get ahead of it, so I don't have to spend another day kind of redesigning a job I've already designed.
I thought what you were saying, and this would be pretty cool, is that you had found a system to itemize the job or parts of the job that get reused for the next job. So you could go through and say, go through my folder for built-in cabinets. There's the plan, whole design plan, everything.
I think we all do that. But that's all in our head.
That's internal, yeah.
Like you say to yourself, okay, I've got to put a dovetail on there. Well, I know how to do a dovetail, so I don't need to draw that out. It's just mental note, you know. But you do need to at least allow yourself the time to do the dovetail. So you need to think about how long did the last one take, you know?
Yeah, well, that's a good way. And I guess there's also some value in, because your sort of entrepreneurial type people, your big business type people always talk about writing down your thoughts. It's just a good practice to be in, to write that sort of thing, those sorts of things down. So if anything, it's probably just a good habit to get into, because you are, I don't know, they use all these words like manifesting your thoughts, and it's a good thing to do. So even just from that perspective, it's a good habit.
Yeah, thinking. You go, Brian.
I was just going to say, like, I find that, like, managing it in a workshop environment, I do the same thing. Like, I have certain notes attached to spreadsheets and things like that, and I'll drop hyperlinks in for hardware, and I'll try to put in my calendar when I ordered things and when they're expected to arrive, and then when they don't arrive that month, But but yeah, in terms of actually doing it day to day in the workshop, I find if I've got one job that has complex elements and simple elements to it, if I'm in a mindset where I'm not prepared to have the concentration levels to deal with the complex stuff, I'll give myself an afternoon off and I will just do some sanding or do some dressing or do this and then come back to it when I think sometimes forcing yourself to do it can not be the right approach. I don't know. Do you find the same thing, or do you just make the jump into it?
I typically know after about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my brain function goes way down.
Yep.
But sometimes, typically, for me, the worst kind of a day is if I have to do a morning delivery or an install, and I don't get back to the workshop till lunch, and then by the time I've had lunch and whatever, I'm ready to do some work, and then I'm like, shit, I've got to actually think about this job. I've got to like cut up some, I don't know, kitchen panels or something. They've got to be the right size, and that's when I'll make a mistake. But that's also, I can't not do that because that's the job for the day, you know. So I've just got to force myself through it.
I reckon I'd be the opposite. If I do a morning install, I find that I get a natural sort of adrenaline kick out of it that nearly sharpens me for the afternoon.
That's interesting. I wouldn't class it as an adrenaline kick. It would be like a massive sigh of relief. And that comes back to the imposter syndrome thing, because I was just thinking about and I still get it where, well, actually not as much, because I was going to say it used to come a lot from the fact that I knew there was a flaw somewhere, there was something that wasn't quite right on a piece, and we all know that there's something that's not 100%. And I used to like really weigh on my mind about, shit, is the client gonna like lie on their back and see that chisel gouge or something that's on the, you know, whatever. And I think now I think the cure for that is just to do better work.
Yep.
And it's a stupid kind of, on one hand it's kind of a stupid idea because you're already doing your best work, but you can always improve. And I feel like the more mind effort you put into the job and actually willingness to create something as good as you can, it's going to come out better, and you will be more proud of the finished result. So there's less of that, oh my god, they're going to see the flaw, because it's really very minor and probably will never be seen if there is anything. And I feel like over the years that my I guess effort, even though I think I was making a really good effort previously, you just learn like what's going to look better. Should I sand for another 20 minutes, or is it good enough? Well, let's just go for a little bit longer, you know, something like that. Just put a bit more effort into it where I can.
Or not even more effort, where your efforts are better utilized.
Yeah, knowing what's important.
But it's probably natural as your skill level has risen as well. Like, these are things that you just learn through making mistakes.
Yeah.
After the install afternoon, that's a perfect time for that. The notes that you've been taking, I reckon, to cover your basis for that.
Well, exactly. Like today, perfect example. We did an install, and at the moment I'm making, essentially some parts of a kitchen, and so unless everything is the same size in a kitchen, and you can just rip, so let's say you've got 15 sheets of plywood for this, whatever you're making, unless you can just rip everything down the middle to get the parts you need, and then you can just cut everything to length, right? That seems like an easy way to make boxes. But that's never the way things are laid out to get the most of your sheets. There's always some weird size thing. And this seems like such an easy tip, but I learnt this from my dad when we were building, working out how the roof would be laid out and where the offcuts of the roofing material would go. So if you can imagine, if you've got a roof with hips on it, let's say you've got an L-shaped roof, if you've got a long piece of roofing iron and you've got to cut it on a diagonal to fit onto the shape of the roof, well, the offcut of that can be flipped around and used on the opposite side of the roof. And so the best way to do it is to, what he would do is color code the roof, each sheet of roofing iron. And this half of it would be colored blue, and then the offcut would be colored green, and he would color the other side of the roof in green, and so he would know where each offcut was going to end up. Otherwise, you end up with lots of offcuts and a more expensive roof. Long story short is that now when I work out my panels, I color code everything. So I just start with the paintbrush tool and whatever I'm using, and this panel's green, that comes from that part of that sheet, that's green. And then, so I don't have to think too much when it comes to actually cutting stuff out in the afternoon. I can just look at a sheet and say, okay, half of this is green, that goes over to that part of that panel, I can label it, and I don't have to think too much about it. And that really helps when your brain get brain fade.
Yep, minimizing human error.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest jumps for me personally, talking about imposter syndrome. And this is possibly a tip for everyone out there, when I started using SketchUp to plan my work was a big deal. I'm sure for you guys, having used this now for many, many, many years, the thought of not using SketchUp is, particularly for bigger projects, it's a bit odd. But I think everyone would start out at a place where they're not using it and it's all in their head and they'll figure it out as they go. But as soon as you make that jump to now I'm using SketchUp, now I'm designing. Now I'm not just a weekend warrior. I'm planning ahead and I'm doing things, and suddenly you feel like you are legit.
Yeah. I think there comes a point where when you're making freestanding pieces, I think you don't have to be on a digital medium as much, because like Bryan does a lot of sketches and it's pretty easy, I guess. I can't sketch like you, Bryan. I'm not saying it's easy to draw, but I'm saying it's easy to, when you see one side of a freestanding piece, you get a pretty good feel for what's happening on the other side. When you start doing built-ins and things that are not freestanding, you've got to then start taking into account the environment that's in, and that's when I started drawing. It's like, I need to make a cupboard, but the walls are way out of square, or the cabinet's on an angle, and instead of laying it out old school on the ground or something, you just draw it to scale on the computer, draw the actual space, and then you draw the cabinet inside of that. And that's why I started with SketchUp. And then I realized it's a much bigger tool in terms of, like you say, you start getting your design hat on and start saying, well, this looks better if I do it like this. So yeah.
I reckon with what you've been saying, Bryan, with the how busy you've been, that must be a pretty good feeling in terms of this whole discussion, because you must be feeling pretty chuffed that it's impossible to not feel like you've made it at this point.
Oh, I still don't feel as though I've made it. I recognize that I've made like big steps over 10 years, that now when I hand over a piece of work to a client, I'm proud of it. I know that it's a good enough quality, but I still find myself comparing it to other makers and going, what would they have done? What would they have done with that? Whoa. So I will always do that, Robin.
I think everyone does that.
It's good in terms of the fact that I feel as though I'm now getting work that I don't have to chase. Like, I'm not putting any money into advertising. The only thing I'm doing is doing like a 3-month EDM to a mailing list, and that's it. Like, doing a little bit of Instagram and a little bit of Facebook, but I find as though the work is finally finding me naturally. I'm not sort of getting to the end of a job and going, shit, where's that next job coming from? So that's good. But like I said, it's a different environment for me now. Like, I think maybe 2019, I was getting close to this. And then the last 2 years of up and down, busy, quiet. It's now trying to find my way back to that 2019 phase again.
It's because you mentioned how you're making a good living by working crazy hours.
Did I use the word good?
Well, I think
I said living. I think I said
living.
Yeah.
As opposed to a not living.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're making some money to pay some bills, which is good.
Yes.
But I was where you were, where I was like, right, I could, if I keep working like this, it's way better money for me because I don't know, I get what I think I deserve, but the workload becomes such that, like, you're having to work stupid hours, and there's this massive way up, and I did it for months and months, where I was like, if I get an employee to help me, all that money I was meant to be earning, half of it straight away goes over to them. And so then I'm now working for minimum wage. So what it means is you've got to get twice as much work.
Yeah.
And then you're
you've got to do the chasing to find that work.
Yeah, and then you go, okay, well, at the moment I've got the 6 months wait list. So that gives me a buffer because I'll get through that, theoretically, let's say I'll get through that 6 months work in 3 months. So it gives you a bit of a buffer to get more work in. But it's such a mental gamble because you're like, well, what if everything drops off and then I'm stuck with an employee? And but once I made the jump, and while I still do go weeks without taking money myself because I've got to pay overheads and the employee, typically the next week is a good payday because the reason I didn't get paid is because I'm waiting for the big cash drop to come in from the job, and it's tough. That's a tough call because you have to weigh up your own mental kind of, can I maintain this, or should I pass it off to someone else and then go through the whole training thing and you end up going 5 steps backwards for a few months.
Yeah. It's funny. I think maybe some of it is learned behavior. Like, I look at the way my dad worked when I was a child, and it was the same thing. Like, he was always there for dinners, and he didn't feel like an absent parent. But then every night he went to his office and he worked, and then he'd be up in the morning, and I think it's a little bit of I don't feel as though I'm getting burnt out by it. Like, it's just a different kind of stress.
But you're also doing what you enjoy.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah.
I'd hope that you are. So that
yeah.
extra
No,
work,
and
while it's still work, it's not the worst work that you could be doing.
100%. And none of these jobs none of them feel like jobs that I would have overlooked if I was too busy. Like, they're all jobs that I'm like, yeah, that'd be good. And it's come along at a time when I'm busy, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just add that to the end of the queue. And I've found that the number of tire kicking job inquiries that I'm getting have gone way down.
That's good.
So I don't know whether that's a result of me doing my price rise in June or June. Whether that's helped. Like, it's weird. Yeah. Anyway, just all these things I'm trying to process at the minute.
We've also got to be careful that we don't, when we're talking about imposter syndrome, we're not talking about our woodworking skill and our business skill in the same way, because those are very different. So, yeah, Bryan, you're, from a business perspective, you're on point, you're doing it, but that could be very different to how you feel about your actual woodworking, which I guess in a way is kind of tricky, because as the business rises, your woodworking is going to taper off because you run out of time. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, or you just end up billing more for your hours and doing less work.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, I was watching. Oh God, you guys are more into YouTube than I am. American guy with the funny mustache.
Sure, narrows it down, eh?
Stuff's quite good. I think he's based in the Midwest somewhere, or Texas, maybe.
Not Johnny Builds?
No,
not
him.
Johnny.
Stuff's a bit better than that. Can't remember his name. He's got a coffee shop at the front. I'm sure anybody that's listening is screaming the name right now.
Coffee shop?
Jesus
it's been a long time since I've watched a woodworking YouTube video.
You guys talk amongst yourselves.
I'm trying to think of something to say now, but I'm just all I can picture is a mustached man with a coffee shop, which again doesn't narrow it down because
I'm selling him a bit short. Like his stuff's fairly contemporary and definitely by American standards, I would consider it to be pretty contemporary.
Was it Third Coast Craftsman?
Nah, not him. Somewhere along those lines.
I've got
it's his name. William. God.
William and Co. What's his name?
William Walker.
Yeah, William Walker.
No. This is awful podcasting.
Well, whatever.
But yeah, I was watching one of his videos, and he was saying that he, I think it was a quoting thing that he'd set up, and his hourly rate that he was charging in not a terribly affluent part of America was $125 an hour. I'm like, Jesus, that would be an interesting way to run a business in Australia.
A one-man band.
I think he employs. God, I'm gonna have to find this. William Douglas.
Don't
know.
William Douglas.
Never heard of him.
I think he's. Never heard of him?
No.
God, I hope that's his. Yeah, it is William Douglas. So like his stuff's, it's got a bit of design to it. Seems well made. It's all walnut because it's American. But yeah, it was just an interesting. I would have assumed that the quoting rates, the labor rates in America would be pretty much on a par with Australia, whereas I couldn't bill myself at $125. What's that? 150 Aussie dollars an hour?
Well, not yet, but I guess the idea is that at some point you will raise to that.
You know what's interesting is that what I always found is that the size. We know about this, but the size of the job, or the type and size of the job, can kind of warrant the price range.
Yep.
Like most people don't want to pay more than $5,000 for a dining table if they're having something custom made. After that, it starts becoming very niche. You've got a very smaller amount of clients willing to pay $70,000 for a dining table.
So you take the budget and work backwards.
Yeah, kind of. But then you look at something like a kitchen, and people go, oh yeah, $50,000 is going to cost me $50,000 for a kitchen. And so straight away you go, well, actually a kitchen probably only costs like $6,000.
Yep.
And then labor and stuff. And so, because with a employee, my charge out rate is about 115, 120.
Yep.
In most jobs, because I've got to allow for me to be working on that job some of the time, and him to be working that job some of the time, and some of the time we're both working on it. And I don't know how that's going to play out. So, got to charge. I charge what I charge, and if I don't work on that job at all, well, that's profit for me.
Yeah, it's money in your pocket.
But I also sat down and drew the drawings for an hour and a half and whatever else, and did all the
and trained your staff member to be able to make it.
I think that's why. And I still price, like this week I've had 3 inquiries for dining tables and chair sets and stuff. So I'm still getting those inquiries, but they're a bit more tire kickerish than legitimate customers, I feel. But I think I don't want to say that I price myself out of that kind of furniture with the labor rates, because when you look at a breakdown of any job, like especially when you're charging that, the labor component is by far the biggest single component.
Yep.
But it's easier to get jobs which feel bigger, like built-ins and stuff like that, because the price point kind of matches the size of the piece.
Yep.
And you can make it in just pretty much the same time as anything. So
yeah,
it's a tough.
With probably less, like, not necessarily less risk to the job, but less risk to like you. It's within your skill set. It's not requiring you to learn anything new or make templates process. Or new jigs or anything like that. It's like, this is a cabinet, I've made this a million times before.
That's right. And it's kind of like, I guess you might describe it as bread and butter, I suppose. And that's, I guess, what is frustrating then when you get someone who wants a dining table and set of chairs, and you're like, okay, kind of rub your hands together, but then
big money.
But then you remember, actually, no, I can't charge, because sometimes you just have to say, I can't charge what I need to charge for this.
Yeah,
it's just stupid money. Like no one's gonna pay for that, and that's a tough one, because you've got to make the call of, do I want to do the job just because it's cool, and will be kind of a learning experience for me, but I'll probably barely break even on it if I charge what I feel like it should, kind of what its price point should be. And that's a hard one. My business point of view is that, no, I just say, no, I want to make some money for my family, but my kind of artist side of me
things change. Things definitely change when you have a family. Like, you're thinking every dollar is your kids, your kids' future.
Yeah, and I certainly spend less on frivolous tools and fancy things now. I just run it to the ground.
Yeah. Speaking about frivolous tools, after spending, I don't know, what I've been teaching probably 5 weeks in the Victorian woodworkers, seeing their jointer has given me a massive jointer envy, and I'm like, is it time to upgrade?
What part of it?
A big long flat bed, and not having to change my combo machine over a thickness of jointer all the time.
Oh yeah, jeez, yeah. Those things look like such a good idea. And I think because milling is a fairly short, continuous task, you can get away with it. But so many of these multifaceted workbenches and tools, they just seem like a pain in the ass more than anything. Just spend the money and get 2 tools, because you spend half your day flipping things around.
Yeah. I think especially if you've got 2 people working in a workshop,
100%,
then it becomes a big bonus to have the 2 separate machines. Like, I haven't found it really limiting on. I've got the Jet 310, I think it is, helical head, and it hasn't struggled in terms of power. Like, I've had to replace 1 belt on it ever in 8 years of using it. But it is just the flip up, flip down, flip up, flip down, and then in summertime, the tables move because of the heat in my workshop.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, something I'm contemplating at the minute.
Have you got any ideas of what you're going to go with?
I was having a look at, again, because then I'd go backwards. So I was having a look at the new Laguna stuff. It looks quite good. It's probably about where my budget would lie. And then I look at the Laguna stuff and I'm like, is it good enough quality? And then I dip over to the SCM stuff. I'm like, I could just buy an SCM combo machine. And then I'm like, but then I've still got a combo machine.
Yeah.
It's just a better combo machine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
It seems like long beds are becoming very popular in the hobbyist space as well. Those should be a lot easier to find.
I would probably see my joint is 2 meters long.
Yeah, but you've got a panel saw.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want probably any longer. I'd rather wide. I'd rather 400 wide or something.
Would you really?
Yeah.
I would rarely put anything more than about 180.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'd just be looking at an 8-inch jointer would do me just fine. Wider thicknesser, but an 8-inch jointer, I'd be alright with that.
I often am dealing with random width oak boards, which are up to 300 wide.
Yeah.
And often it's just a case of, well, I have to rip it in half if it's got a twist in it. All I can really do is rip it in half and then join it back together. But it'd be nice to have the option of a big flat surface to run things over.
Yeah. It's funny, like my preference would always be to rip it in half anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just to reduce the amount that you turn into wood dust by trying to get warps and bows and twists and things.
Yeah, that's true. Like, if your timber's really banana-y, then, you're probably better to chop it.
So, yeah.
But it's not just that. I mean, putting a 400 wide board through over a jointer, I mean, if you're doing anything harder than, oak, that machine's going to have to be an absolute beast to put it through, but you also, to control that, is going to just be a nightmare.
Oh, no, it made me feel more manly to have a big wide jointer. It's just one of
have
those
this image of the board just getting launched backwards because you've got to put a tow rope on it to drag it through, because
it's the kind of thing where I would probably use it perhaps as if you had to do like a big wide tabletop or bench top, you could do it in like 3 or 4 glue ups and then throw the glue ups in individual sections over the jointer and then glue them up as in their final assembly. Like that.
Yep.
That's the kind of thing
that makes sense to me.
Really helpful. And like if you were getting into the workbench game, you could do that with like a Roubo style workbench top or something, but you ever only do that once. So.
You've got an old 3-phase jointer, right?
No, my jointer is 15 amp.
Right. Okay. Single phase. Yeah.
3 phases for my saw and extractor.
Okay. But is it a big old vintagey, like heavy jointer? Or is it?
No, it's like a high end DIY style.
Okay.
It's essentially, I think, a rip off of the Jet. It's Chinese rip off of Jet stuff. Same factory, different paint.
Yep. Different paint, different sticker.
Yeah. So it's probably 8-9 years old or something.
I've eyed out because I sold my jointer. Hallelujah! Never want to see that thing again. So glad to get rid of it. But Carbotech and Timbercon both do a parallelogram style long bed jointer now. Yep. So that's I've budgeted how much I need when I get back to the shop for all the tools I'm going to have to get, and that's where the majority of my money is going, is the jointer. Because I never want to have to fight with that tool again.
You don't have any of your stash of wood, do you? You got rid of all your stuff you were drying, or?
Yeah, I sold all of that.
Yeah.
I had some paper bark slabs. They were about 1 meter wide, probably about 1 meter square. I had 2 packs of them. They were about maybe 1.5 meters high.
Oh, wow.
And I just cut them, and at the time I needed the money to get here to Tasmania. But now I look back and I just think that was just so beautiful. The things I could have done with that, and that guy he was the greatest man on the planet, because he just took all the wood in one go, 2.5 grand's worth of wood in one go. But he got the absolute bargain of a lifetime, because I was desperate. Nice. The amount of he got so much wood for that money. I hope he's putting it to good use.
There'll be other trees, Robin, once you get back up there.
Well, that's it. And now I've got a fresh new space to fill up again. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, we better call it there.
Yep, so bedtime for Joey.
Yep, it's bedtime.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And don't forget, next show we're going to have a mysterious guest. No, well, you'll all recognize him when he comes on. But we're super excited about it.
Yep.
And cheers to everyone who's sort of given the Instagram a bit of a follow and dropping messages on there. It's a much easier way to connect with people than just constant DMs on our personal accounts. So head over to the Shop Stool Podcast on Instagram.
Yeah, it seems to be working really well. Righto. Cool, guys.
All right.
We'll talk again in a fortnight.
Yep. Good one. See ya.
See you then.
All right, take it easy. Bye.